good morning. Welcome to Filthy Ketchup. Thank you to all my new subscribers. Thank you for tuning in. Today's video is about a lesser known serial killer called Vera Renczi. Vera Renczi was beautiful, she was seductive, and she was deadly. She was convicted of killing 35 people in the 1920s in Romania. Let's dive straight into it. Vera Renczi was born at the end of the 19th century and she came from an extremely well-to-do family. Her family were very rich, they were upper middle class, and she married very early to a very wealthy man. I think he was a banker, and she discovered during that marriage that her husband had cheated on her. Now, Vera Renczi was extremely beautiful, as you can see from her pictures, but she was also, a wild girl. She was wild, she was fun, but she expected her husband to be absolutely faithful to her because she was so beautiful. And when she found out that her husband had cheated on her, she was furious, absolutely furious. And many people think that this is what precipitated her murderous behaviour. Now, that husband disappeared. He disappeared, no one knew where he was. She married again to another very rich man. He also disappeared after an alleged infidelity. Now, Vera Renczi then started on a path. She put her money, her seductive beauty, and her house to work, let's say. Now, in her house, she had a big wine cellar in her house. She had a beautiful place, and she started on a path of, she would invite men, married men, always married men. I think in some way she was punishing them for cheating on their wives. I don't know, there's some interesting psychology there. Anyway, she would invite married men to a very ritualistic, seductive dinner. All the dinner would be laid out beautifully, she would be dressed beautifully, and she was very, very, very seductive, Vera Renczi. That's one thing you have to understand. So she drew these men in a very, very seductive way. But what the men didn't know is that the dinners were heavily laced with arsenic. Now, arsenic is a very, very common tool in serial murder, especially for females. Females are 5 times more likely to use poison as a method of murder because poison is non-confrontational. You don't have to get close to the victim, you just have to get close to their food or their medicine or whatever you're poisoning. And poisoning is a very sinister method of poisoning someone, and arsenic poisoning is not a fun way to die. Arsenic poisoning causes gastrointestinal, meaning in the stomach, hemorrhagic poisoning. So the stomach lining bleeds, and it bleeds and bleeds. So you have basically a hemorrhage inside your stomach, and that's what causes death. It's very, very painful, very cruel way to do it. So she would have these very seductive dinners, and the men would be there, and after the dinner, and then the poison would start to take effect. Then the married man would die. But what makes Vera Renczi so, in a crazy way, so fascinating is what she did then. It's savage enough to kill someone, but then what she did, she would take the body down to her wine cellar, and she had these zinc, because Vera Renczi had a lot of money, she had a lot of resources to be able to do this. She took them down to her cellar, and she had these zinc caskets, the metal zinc. So she had these coffins made out of zinc in her basement, and she would put the body in the zinc casket. Now, because the basement was damp and the caskets were made out of zinc, it created the conditions called adiposia. Adiposia means a stone-like or wax-like consistency on the bodies. So the bodies would mummify and turn to stone. So the bodies would not decompose, they were basically mummified. So the bodies would turn to stone or like sort of hard soap or wax. And she would put the bodies in there, and then she would go down to the basement. It's so crazy. She would go down to the basement and talk to the men. So they were like, Vera Renzi's psychology was very, very dominant. She was a very sexually dominant, very psychologically dominant woman. And these married men were like her possessions, her toys, her dolls. She would go down there and talk to her dolls, to her men, and that would fulfill a need that she had for a short while. And then when that need started to, because a lot of people say that serial murderers have an addiction, like a drug addiction, you know. So when that sort of high wears off, you know, it starts to build up again and build up again and build up again, and then they need to do it again. So that's what she would do. When that kind of need sort of wore off and she wanted a new toy, she wanted a new doll, she would then find another married man. They were exclusively married men. And I do believe that she was punishing these married men for cheating on her wives, just as her husband had cheated on her. She was very, very proud of her work. Now, she would get another married man, seduce him, invite him to these seductive dinners, heavily lace the dinners with arsenic. The men would die. I mean, there must have been tons of arsenic. I mean, most women who use arsenic poisoning use it little bit to make it look like the person's ill. But Vera Renczi didn't want to do that. She just bosh all the arsenic and then kill them straight away, bring them down to the cellar and put them in the zinc coffins. Now, she was doing this for a while. Female serial killers on average take 8 years longer than male serial killers to get caught, because there's still a misconception, let's say, there's still a misconception that women don't do things like this, that women aren't vicious, that women aren't sexually motivated by murder, but that isn't the case. And we're talking about the 1920s, so you can imagine back then she was getting away with this for years and years and years. Finally, a wife of one of the men that she seduced and killed brutally called the police and said that the last place her husband was seen was Vera Renczi's home. The police go to the home. Now, you have to remember, Vera Renczi is very wealthy. She's very respectable. She comes from an upper middle class family. So, you know, the police can't just storm into her house. They go there a couple of times because they themselves become suspicious of it. I think she must have let a couple of things slip while they were talking to her. They didn't like it. They came back, they search her house, and in the cellar they find 35 bodies of men, including her first 2 husbands that disappeared and her son. She killed her first 2 husbands for cheating on her. Then she killed another 33 men for cheating on their wives. Then, just to keep herself entertained, she kills her son as well. I mean, Vera Renczi was seductive. She was wild. She killed 35 men and her son without anyone suspecting a thing for years. But when she was caught, Vera Renczi boasted to the police. Vera Renczi was proud of her work. She was proud of what she did. and obviously she was imprisoned, and she showed no remorse whatsoever. She showed absolutely no remorse. When she was apprehended and she was incarcerated, she showed no remorse whatsoever. She refused to take responsibility, and eventually she died of cerebral hemorrhage. Do you get those days sometimes where you just can't talk? She died of cerebral hemorrhage during her incarceration. So that's the story of Vera Renczi. She was beautiful, seductive, wild. She killed 35 people and stored them in her basement, turned them into mummies. They turned to stone in her basement, and she treated them like toys. They were her toys, you know. So there's a lesser known serial killer for you there. Thank you for tuning in today. This is Filthy Ketchup. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Wherever you are, please stay safe. Please be kind to each other. Please show kindness and empathy to everybody, everywhere, whether you're at home, at school, in the office, wherever you happen to be. Please be kind to yourself. Please be kind to each other. This is Filthy Ketchup. Peace out.